Your Excellencies, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your participation in this program. The initiative between CRUISE and the GCF SAP Scaling Up Framework for Accelerating Climate Finance for Climate Information and Early Warning Systems. The objective of this session is to introduce to you the work that CRUISE and GCF are doing together to accelerate and scale up climate finance for investment in the climate information and early warning system developing countries, particularly Africa, LDC, and SIDS. The session will begin with an introduction, a short introduction from GCF. Mr. Dimitro Innocenti, manager of the GCF Simplified Approval Process. And this will be followed up with a presentation from the CRUISE Secretariat on the collaboration between CRUISE and GCF SAP, which will be presented by Maria Londres Kathleen Mascasi, the CRUISE Project Officer. And then we will have a short Q&A session to address burning questions on what the first presentation discussed. And then we will have a follow-up presentation from the CRUISE Secretariat, which will look at case studies of successful early warning system projects financed by CRUISE that has the potential of being scaled up. And this will be presented by Jean-Baptiste Migraine, head of WMO Technical Collaboration. And then we'll have a Q&A on his presentation, and then we will conclude. And so to start this section, I would like to introduce Mr. Dimitro Innocenti, manager of the GCF Simplified Approval Process, to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Joseph, and to also on my side, thanks to all the colleagues from CRUISE Secretariat that are here today with us, and to John in particular, who is, I understand that the last minute problem is not in the room, but he came to Korea, is in Korea. He traveled to Korea for this event, and in fact, restate the importance that this partnership has both for us at the Green Climate Fund, Simplified Approval Process, and the CRUISE Secretariat. So I start by saying that we are definitely excited about collaborating with the CRUISE Secretariat to develop this framework whose intention is to scale up successful projects that have been financed by CRUISE in climate information and early warning systems. We see actually important benefits from this partnership, especially for the GCF accredited entities, all accredited entities, but especially direct access entities, as well as the countries. Scaling up successful projects from CRUISE with the SAP will have important benefits, especially for SIDS, LDCs, and African states, where still today the penetration of climate observation systems is low, and system integration is also suboptimal. So we believe that this partnership is strategic because using the simplified approval process of the GCF to scale up CRUISE project will basically allow us to focus our finance where it's most needed at the community level, on those so-called people-centered early warning system that really not only focus on the important adaptation benefits, but most of all, they focus on the needs of the beneficiaries that we serve. And we should also remind that this partnership with CRUISE is perfectly aligned with the UN Secretary General Early Warnings for All initiatives that is coordinated by the WMO. And we are quite excited to be an important contributor to the UN Secretary General initiative. This partnership was already endorsed by the steering committee of CRUISE I thank actually the chair and the steering committee of Cruise that hosted me. I had the chance to present this partnership at their steering committee. It was endorsed, and it's also aligned with the GCF board decision that last May updated the simplified approval process, basically asking us to establish this type of partnership to accelerate projects that the SAP can scale up from other donors. So on our side, this is perfectly aligned, and it's basically one of the activities that is allowing us to implement the board decision of the GCF on the new simplified approval process. Well, as I said, we expect that these partnerships will be beneficial for all accredited entities and for countries, and will hinge around three principles, let's say. The first one is that it will focus on the evaluation of cruise projects, because we want to reward success. Our intention is to understand from the evaluation of cruise projects where it's worthy to scale up activities, where we know that finance from the SAP can really have the maximum climate benefits for the countries. So having this type of evidence of results, and will be one of the arguments that will be discussed today in one of the presentation from our colleague Jean-Baptiste Migraine, will be at the center of our collaboration. The second one is country ownership. The determination of which project GCF SAP will scale up from cruise will always hinge around the concept that that project is high priority for the country. And the third one is the sustainability. Scaling up investment means that we have to find a way that what we do in terms of investment in climate infrastructures, in meteorological equipment, as a sustainability in the long term. With Cruise, we are going to see a meaningful way to involve the private sector and find innovative financing approaches during the scale-up phase. I wanted just to stress one thing, that this partnership, it's indeed open to all GCF accredited entities, especially those that will be in the best place to be in a position to scale up early warning system project in that specific context, in that specific country. And it will work in synchron with what Joseph is doing to create a system to fast track early warning system projects through SAP, through guided templates. Our aim is to start the operationalization of this framework as soon as possible in 2023, and of course we will closely monitor the results of this partnership in order to make it even more efficient and impactful in the medium and long term. So this is something where we all have a long-term vision to work together. And I stop here, and Joseph, back to you with a wish to all of us to have a productive discussion today, and an excellent way forward. Back to you. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Demetrio, for the very insightful introduction and outlining the strategies in terms of how Cruise and GCF are working to scale up climate information and early warning systems. We will now hear from Ms. Maria Londres Kathleen Macassar, the Cruise Project Officer, who will tell us about the collaboration between Cruise and the GCF SAP process. Over to you, Maria.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Right. I hope you can all see the presentation on the screen. Good evening, everyone, excellencies and colleagues in Incheon, and good morning from Geneva. My name is LK Makasil. I'm Program Officer from the Climate Risk Early Warning System Cruise Secretariat, hosted by the World Meteorological Organization. And I'm here to introduce CRUISE and to also provide an overview of the GCF CRUISE collaboration on scaling up investments for early warning in LDCs and SIDS. Very briefly, just to introduce CRUISE, so our overall objective is to contribute to the reduction of disaster mortality by increasing access to early warnings and risk information, specifically targeting least developed countries and small island developing states. On the right of the slide, you will see the map where CRUISE is active and have investments in the different countries and regions. Currently, we are benefiting through our investment 73 vulnerable countries from the 9-country and 7 regional projects that are ongoing, including
the slides are not moving, LK.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you see it now?
It's not full screen, so we see the small slide. Maybe you need to change on the small ones.
My apologies. Does this work?
Now, yes, if you move on the small ones, yes.
Okay, because it's not the slideshow is not working, and my apologies for that. So thank you very much. So as I was saying, currently we are covering 73 vulnerable countries, benefiting also from our 9-country and 7 regional projects, and 1 global project that is being, these are being implemented by our 3 implementing partners, which are WMO, the World Bank, and the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And as of date, a total of $84 million have already been contributed to the cruise by our 8 members. These are Australia, France, Finland, Germany, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. So here you can see that cruise was actually launched in 2015, and we have completed our initial phase. And for the next phase, we have an operational plan, which its main objective is to deliver and scale up our efforts. And here you can see that cruise invests at 3 levels. At country level, wherein we assist national institutions to improve access to effective impact-based early warning system. Second is at the regional level, wherein we support our regional institutions building capacities to deliver services, and at the global level to ensure that there's coherence of investments in early warning and no duplication at the same time. So scaling up of cruise and to continue aligning and adding value to the existing and potential projects to maximize and ensure longevity of cruise impact through concerted efforts. This is already mentioned by Demetrio in his introductory remarks. March of this year, during the World Met Day, the UN Secretary General made an announcement of this ambitious objective to scale up financing, collaboration, and effectiveness of operations to ensure coverage of everyone within 5 years on early warning. This is an opportunity also for cruise to contribute, and based on the assessment, we are fit for purpose to play a role in this early warning for all initiative of the UN Secretary General. But of course, this would require financing, scaling up of financing, and per our assessment in terms of our pipeline funding needs, we would require an additional $40 million to cover all those those in the list of the pipeline countries and regions. And until 2027, which is the time frame of the UN Secretary General, our funding needs amount to $155 million US. So as noted earlier, success in cruise investments is crucial to see if there's an opportunity for scale up. So how do we measure success in cruise investments? We can say that we measure at 3 levels. So the first level is more at the development level, wherein we make sure that we measure in terms of the reduction of lives and livelihoods lost to extreme climate events, the contribution of the cruise investments to higher level objectives and international agreements, such as the SDGs, the Sendai Framework, and the Paris Climate Agreement. The second level would be more at the institutional capacity of national and regional institutions, bridging the capacity gap so that they could deliver services related to the 4 elements of the early warning system. You would see here the 4 elements of the early warning system, and for each one, there is a corresponding cruise output to which the implementing partners indicate explicitly in their project proposals and also report regularly on their progress to the steering committee. And the third level is the contribution of cruise investments to the cruise programming principles or value propositions, and they're all listed here, which is of course aligned with the GCF principles as well. This our country ownership, wherein we ensure that our investments are actually the articulated needs of the countries, targeting life-saving needs to ensure that there's capacity and systems to issue timely warnings or to take remedial action. Third is people-centered approaches. We prioritize investments that support early warning systems developed with the participation of the people and communities that most require warnings. Fourth is gender responsiveness. We recognize that women's empowerment is fundamental for building resilience. And this has to be mainstreamed in all investments of cruise. We also have a gender responsive programming operational procedures. Fifth is leveraging resources to see cruise contributions that they provide long-term investments, targeting improvements in policies, institutions, and program design, and that investment levels are increased and provide co-benefits. Next is integrated and inclusive programming, alignment between the implementing partners and their relevant expertise and networks and ongoing programs and operations in the countries. And finally, coherence and coordination to avoid duplication, but rather promote coordination between activities related to climate change, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development. Cruise is a highly specialized financing mechanism and relatively small compared to other financing mechanisms. So we recognize that we cannot support and fulfill all of the associated needs of the LDCs and SIDS over time. That's why it's important to have partnerships with institutions such as the GCF to promote sustainability, which is the cornerstone of cruise, and at the same time also of the GCF, and to accelerate access to finance of LDCs and SIDS so that support will be and capacity building will be longer and ensure that the climate impact will be sustained on a sufficiently long period. Hence, this collaboration is very much it's very important for us. This development of a scaling up framework through the GCF simplified approval process, which we think is very crucial to ensure that there is a structured approach in order to provide countries with incentives and benefits to scale up successful cruise projects with GCF resources. This will enhance country ownership, scale up successful actions financed by cruise through GCF accredited entities, their proposals that they submit through the simplified approval process, encourage innovation and promote sustainability. And this is with an estimated leveraging of around $700 million. In terms of process, so we're in the initial stages, but in the next days, we will, of course, undertake this extensive process in developing the step-by-step guidance, along with coming up with a list of potential countries for scaled-up financing. We will be hiring an expert advisor to support both the cruise and GCF secretariats in doing the assessment and the consultations, with a view that by October we'll have the proposed approach with the criteria, incentives, and the process for the scaling up. And at COP27, we will have our cruise steering committee meeting where we aim to present the scale-up framework and also as part of the UNSG's Early Warning for All initiative. And as mentioned earlier, the target is by mid-2023, this will be piloted, operationalized. So that's the overview. Thank you very much once again to the GCF Secretariat for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, clearly articulating what the Cruise Secretariat is doing together with the GCF, and opportunity for us to enhance coherence and complementarity between the two mechanisms, make it fit for purpose and easy access for countries to access resources to build fit for purpose early warning systems. Our next presentation will be given by Jean-Baptiste Magrin, WMO Head of Technical Coordination. He will provide some case studies of successful early warning system projects financed by cruise. Jean-Baptiste, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Joseph, and I'm pleased to meet you again here. And so I'm going to illustrate some examples of countries where cruise projects and GCF projects basically have been implemented in synergy and with great collaboration. So these are not examples of the scale-up mechanism, because the scale-up mechanism is not yet in place, but it's examples where cruise and GCF projects basically have been operating hand in hand. So if we look at the GCF website and at the cruise website, we can immediately notice that there are a number of countries which benefit from GCF and cruise. And we have Malawi with UNDP, Mali, Burkina with World Bank, the Southwest Indian Ocean Islands with AFD, as well as the Pacific Islands with UNEP. So I'm not going to go in a lot of details, and I'll leave time for discussions, but if we take some examples like that, in Burkina Faso, so cruise projects started before the GCF investment. And so we used cruise to demonstrate that we can improve the socioeconomic benefits of rural communities with enhanced climate information and early warning services. And now with GCF, which is 33 million in total, 25 from GCF plus funding from the World Bank and from the government, we are basically scaling up the approach that was demonstrated with cruise. And we are also using the advisory services that were brought in from cruise to ensure optimal use of the financing that that is brought by GCF. We have a similar example. I've tried to focus on different aspects on different countries, but in Mali, we were starting from a point where the early warning system was mostly focused on food security. And so it was mostly involving 4 stakeholders: meteo, hydro, agriculture, and food security warning system. And with CRUISE already, we enlarged this collaboration to the civil protection to have a more multi-hazard approach to warning systems. And we also added new systems for forecasting of sand and dust storms, flash flooding, that complements basically the previous system, which was mostly focused on locust and drought. So similarly, we have one CRUISE, one GCF project in Mali, and both work really hand in hand. In fact, both are led by the World Bank and implemented by the same project task team leader. And so the collaboration is very easy. We have another case with AFD in the Southwest Indian Ocean. So the CRUISE project and the GCF project were approved more or less at the same time. And in this case, CRUISE is going to focus more on strengthening regional centers and provision of advisory services to the 4 countries that then will benefit from the investment funds from GCF. It is expected that the GCF project would start on 23 September next week. And similarly, in the Pacific, we have a CRUISE project that supports 14 countries. And currently, UNEP is implementing, is funding a project targeting 5 of them. And in that case also, we are basically building on the comparative advantages of WMO and UNEP to really support, on one side, the regional centers, and on another side, the capacities of the national institutions. So we've worked on trying to map out the comparative advantages of the different funding mechanisms. So on one side, you have the large investments, basically, which are mostly country-led, and they basically support the strengthening of the institution, infrastructure, equipment, and so on. The fact that it's country-led, it makes investments more sustainable, and it ensures that operation and maintenance is taken over by the country by the end of the project. With smaller investments like those of GFDR, UNDR, or WMO, we use those mostly for analytical studies to identify the most critical gaps and identify recommended interventions. We can also demonstrate operational solutions at small scale, which can be upscaled later. And we can prepare the ground for those larger investments, which are on the left column. And the last one is also sustaining efforts from previous projects, when the previous project basically had to close a bit too fast and we've not reached completely the outcomes. And then CRUISE basically is operating to support both, in fact, to support the small and the large investments, with mobilization of expertise from those 3 partners, which are World Bank, UNDR, and WMO, with strengthening of regional cooperation, because very often the large investments are country-based, so they don't take advantage of the potential of regional cooperation as much as they could. And also to ensure optimal use of investment resources by creating communities of practice, exchanging among countries that start from the same stage and have the similar objectives. So in WMO, whenever we start an early warning project, we try to support all the components: institutional strengthening, research, observation, modeling, development of services, etc. This is just a few examples of what WMO has been leading since 2017. So we have the updated multi-hazard checklist. We have the 2020 State of Climate Services report, which was focusing on risk information and early warning. And now, since March, we have this UNSG initiative, which we are also coordinating. So that's all for me, and I hope it was not too fast.
Okay, thank you again, Jean-Baptiste, for the wonderful presentation on the case studies of cruise, detailing how those investment has gone to support countries and presents opportunity for scaling up through the GCF SAP process. We will now open the floor for questions and answers. And we would like to thank the three remotely connected speakers who provided this presentation for them to answer the questions. So let's open the floor and get the questions from the participants. Okay.
So my first question is, are there any limits in terms of accredited entities or countries who can bring a project to GCF for scaling up through the SAP?
I can take that question, Joseph, if you want.
Yeah, go for it, Dimitro.
No, thanks. Thanks for this question. Yes, the reply is absolutely not. In fact, as part of the framework that we will do together, GCF SAP and Cruise, there will be a set of steps, and of course, as I mentioned, at the center of the scaling up process, there is first a criteria that tell us the measure of success, as both LK, Maria, and Jean-Baptiste said. But there is also an assessment that is done with the countries of who is possibly the accredited entities that have the right track record to bring this type of projects, country experience in the sector. And of course, we can also think how we can connect this framework to the project-specific accreditation assessment, which the board approved last May, and which gives the possibility for non-accredited entities, which are supported, of course, by the country, to bring one project to the GCF. And of course, this can be very well a project under the SAP. So we intend also to capitalize on the fact that there is this board decision that can be particularly strategic within the implementation of this framework. So in a nutshell, there is no restrictions. All accredited entities will be able to access the benefit of this scaling up framework, and especially the direct access entities. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if the other two presenters will like to follow up, or we'll pick the next question.
So thank you for the presentations. I have a question for both Cruz and the Secretariat. And I guess the question would be like, we've seen some of the examples, but like what criteria are we specifically looking at when we look at scaling up a project? Does it have to have an evaluation? Does it have to be satisfactory? What is the criteria that we're looking for these success cases? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the presenters, any of you can go for it. Yeah, Jean-Baptiste, you want to take this one?
Rather let Elkai from the cruise secretariat, because
Thank you.
they've been preparing this, these procedures. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. So I have shared how the cruise measures its success in terms of the investments, and the specific criteria for the scaling up framework will be defined through a process that we will be undertaking. But in terms of like initial ideas, of course, we would like to see mainly three things, as mentioned also by Demetrio earlier, that there has to be evidence of success through an evaluation that was conducted, and we, in all our cruise projects, we recommend that at least one external evaluation be conducted so that this evidence can be documented. And second, as we also reinforced earlier, it's more on the sustainability, to have like evidence of sustainability, which is important both for cruise and for GCF, and also looking at the climate impacts of the investments. But a more thorough process to define this criteria will be done.
And maybe we can add that there's already a criteria for when we apply for cruise funding. There's a criteria that's called leveraging. And so most cruise projects have been already started with close coordination and close synergies with larger investments. So this scale-up is adding to a context where most cruise projects are already combined or closely coordinated with larger investments. So it's not completely new for cruise to work like that in a coordinated way.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Thank you for your presentation. We are part of the NDA of Ecuador. We don't have a project. We'd like to know how to apply to a new project, how to do this. Is in a specific window, it's a readiness. We are not so clear. How can we use this? Thanks.
Yeah, Dimitri, you want to take this question?
Yes, no, thank you very much for this question and greetings. Maybe I can ask, maybe I'm wrong. In fact, Maria and Jean-Baptiste should reply to that. Cruise might not have a project in Ecuador, but this doesn't mean that we do not serve Ecuador or other countries where there is no cruise project. In fact, basically what we are doing from the perspective of the GCF simplified approval process is to give countries multiple avenues, let's say, on how they can access GCF finance through the simplified approval process, also taking advantage of certain structure that will give them a fast tracking to GCF finance through the SAP. So, for example, if a country will not have a cruise project that we can scale up, or they might have a cruise project that maybe, as we just said, as Jean-Baptiste and Maria just said, might not be actually good enough to be scaled up, because there is also this option. The fact that we have criteria, it's exactly not because by default we scale up all cruise projects, but because we are going to select the best projects that have performed well and where we see potential and benefits for the communities and the environment and the countries. So we are getting equipped with other ways to support countries like Ecuador, or countries that do not have a cruise project, by doing two things. First, we will have this type of scaling up framework with other donors. We already started a collaboration with the Adaptation Fund, for example, to do this type of activities in a similar fashion to accelerate climate finance through SAP for projects that scale up projects from the Adaptation Fund. Of course, we intend to do the same with other donors, that can be the GEF or others. Most of all, as I just mentioned quickly at the beginning, and actually I would almost leave the floor to you, Joseph, we will also give the opportunity for accelerating access to GCF climate finance through the SAP to projects that will follow a certain type of design in certain activities, in certain sectors like climate information and early warning systems, through a template that the Secretariat is actually developing, and Joseph is in fact leading on these activities. So the intention is, of course, that we are inclusive and that we have multiple avenues for accelerating access to climate finance for certain type of projects through the SAP. Back to you.
Maybe on Ecuador, we have a project called Enandes in WMO, which is funded by Adaptation Fund. Ecuador is not an LDC, so it will not be supported by CRUISE, but since Demetrio just said that there are similar scale-up opportunities between Adaptation Fund and GCF, we're happy to discuss also how we can scale up potentially our engagement in Ecuador. We have Adaptation Fund and Swiss Development Corporation currently supporting the development of climate services there.
Okay, thank you very much for the intervention. I think we have one question. Okay, Edson, you can go for it.
So, my question is, what do you see as the main benefit for collaboration in respect of the countries as well as the accredited entities? Over.
Yeah, I think I will let any of the presenters respond to this question.
Well, I can say thanks for this question. Actually, it's important, and well, let's say from what I would say, it's more our perspective from the GCF Secretariat and SAP. The benefit, it's what I said, is basically accelerating access. And this, in my opinion, access to the GCF climate finance through the SAP, through these systems. And this is going to be particularly important when it comes especially to projects that intend to take actions versus urgent climate adaptation needs. In other words, disaster risk management action, disaster risk reduction actions, those type of adaptation projects that actually are needed to deliver results, to protect communities from the impact of climate hazards, for example. So this type of projects, they cannot wait. They need to happen yesterday, not even now. And I think in particular CRUISE that works in least developed countries, but also work in small island development states, which typically are the countries that on one hand are more exposed to climate risk, on the other hand they have the lower coping capacity, are the one that basically suffer in relative terms the most in economic and human and environmental terms from the impact of natural hazards that are related to climate change. And therefore, I think that the main benefit is this one, that we can get closer to be more responsive to the needs of these countries, especially for these particular actions. But of course, I would also like to hear from our colleagues in cruise and WMO, their perspective into that.
Thank you very much. So, as mentioned, cruise, our support is mainly targeted to LDCs and SIDS. And the needs in LDCs and SIDS are tremendous. And cruise being a highly specialized funding agency, as I mentioned earlier, we cannot fulfill all the associated needs in LDCs and SIDS. That's why partnerships to scale up is really very crucial. So this cooperation with the GCF through the scaling up framework is very encouraging, and it will help also, of course, promote innovation, more country ownership, and at the same time sustainability of what has been started by the cruise projects through accelerating finance with the support of the GCF.
And we see that in some cases, country-led investment are challenged by the mobilization of the right expertise to guide the optimal use of investment funds that are made available to them. So the collaboration between a cruise and a GCF project basically can really address these shortcomings by bringing the expertise from the 3 cruise implementing partners directly to the countries, and leaving the country in the driver's seat for all the procurement and modernization of their national services. So it's really, complementing each other very well.
Okay, thank you very much. We would like to wrap up and thank the speakers for the great presentation, and also to thank you, the participants. It's been such a lively discussion. But I would like to stress on points which we will use as takeaways. The cruise GCF scaling up framework is instrumental to scale up investment in developing countries. We've had the relevance of such an arrangement in ramping up the deployments of climate information and early warning systems, particularly to meet the NDC commitments, and also the UN Secretary General's call for ensuring that within the next 5 years, every country has a fit for purpose climate information and early warning systems. So we expect this partnership between cruise and SAP, GCF SAP, can increase and accelerate the flow of climate finance for impactful adaptation actions, particularly those in Africa, LDCs and SIDS. And the cruise GCF partnership is scaling up successful early warning system projects, which has been originally financed by cruise and will contribute to an objective set by the UN Secretary General Early Warning System for All Alliance. And so we look forward to this very innovative approach of working with cruise to scale up these important investments and operationalizing and piloting of the framework in 2023. And so let me take this opportunity to also thank you for your patience and all the rich contributions that you've made. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.